The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered barn as John Mitchell wiped his calloused hands on his overalls. Dust particles danced in the golden light streaming through the cracks in the wooden slats. 3 generations of Mitchells had worked this land, but never before had a president set foot on it. That was about to change. "They are coming," Lisa called from the porch, shielding her eye from the sun as she gazed down the long date road. John nodded, his weathered face a map of worry lines and determination. He wasn't a man easily impressed by titles or power. To him, respect was earned through actions, not words. And after years of watching politicians make empty promises while family farms like his struggled to survive, his patience had worn thin. "Dad, is the president really coming to our farm?" asked Emma, their 12-year-old daughter, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Apparently so," John replied, adjusting his cap, "though I can't imagine why he'd bother with folks like us." But deep down, he knew. The handwritten letter he'd sent last month in a moment of frustration, never expecting it to be read, had somehow reached President Donald Trump's desk. And even more surprisingly, the president had accepted his invitation. The distant rumble of engines grew louder as a convoy of black SUVs appeared on the horizon, kicking up clouds of dust on the rural road that hadn't seen this much activity since the county fair 3 summers ago. The arrival. Secret Service agents poured out of vehicles, their eyes scanning every inch of the Mitchell farm with practiced precision. In their dark suits and earpieces, they looked comically out of place among the chickens and tractors. "So, the president will be arriving momentarily," announced an agent with a buzz cut and sunglasses, addressing John as if he were delivering military intelligence. John simply nodded. "We're ready when he is." Minutes later, the presidential limousine rolled to a stop. When Donald Trump emerged, his signature suit and red tie stood in stark contrast to the pastoral setting. For a moment, these two worlds, the highest corridors of power and the most fundamental element of American life, faced each other across the farmyard. "Mr. Mitchell," Trump called out, extending his hand. "I got your letter." John stepped forward, wiping his hands one final time before offering a firm handshake. "Mr. President, I appreciate you coming, but I should warn you, I won't be sugarcoating my words." Trump's lips curved into a familiar smirk. "I wouldn't expect anything less." The confrontation. Lisa invited them into the modest farmhouse, its walls lined with family photographs spanning decades. The kitchen table, scratched and worn from years of family meals, now seated the President of the United States. John wasted no time getting to the point. "So, politicians make big promises from podiums, but meanwhile, real farmers are drowning. Prices drop, fuel costs rise, and we're expected to just weather the storm. Are you here to listen, or just to talk?" Trump raised an eyebrow, clearly not accustomed to such direct challenges. "I respect farmers, John. I've done more for the agricultural sector than most presidents. Then why am I still struggling?" John shot back, leaning forward. "Why are my neighbors selling their land to corporations? Why are family farms disappearing across America?" The tension in the room was palpable. Secret Service agents shifted uncomfortably, hands hovering near their weapons as if John's words themselves posed a threat to national security. "Mr. President," Lisa interjected, placing a homemade loaf of cornbread on the table, "perhaps you'd like something to eat while you talk." Trump nodded, grateful for the momentary reprieve from John's intensity. "We grow food that feeds thousands," John continued, gesturing toward the refrigerator, "yet we can barely afford our own groceries. Does that seem right to you?" Trump frowned. "What's stopping you from succeeding?" "Big corporations," John replied without hesitation. "They buy up land, drive down prices, and push out small farmers. They have the politicians in their pockets, while we have dirt under our fingernails." "That's capitalism," Trump stated matter-of-factly, tapping his fingers on the table. John's jaw clenched. "There's a difference between fair competition and being crushed, Mr. President. This isn't a free market. It's a rigged game." The realization. Trump took a bite of Lisa's cornbread. "It's good," he admitted, seeming surprised. "We sell this at the local market," Lisa explained with a sad smile. "Barely make enough to cover the cost of ingredients." "Farming isn't just a job, Mr. President." John sighed, his voice softening for the first time. It's our heritage, our identity. This land should be my children's inheritance, not a mountain of debt. Trump nodded silently, his expression unreadable. I hear you, he finally said. John leaned in, his eyes locked with Trump's. But do you understand us? For perhaps the first time in this visit, or maybe in a long time, Donald Trump looked around and truly saw where he was. This wasn't a boardroom negotiation or a campaign rally. He was sitting in the heart of America, where policy decisions weren't abstract concepts but daily realities that determined whether families like the Mitchells could keep their way of life alive for another generation. The crack in the wall, the worn-out furniture, the family photos showing the same land through decades. For once, Trump had to listen. Let me show you something, John said, rising from his chair. The lesson. Outside, John held up his hands, calloused, cracked, and stained with the evidence of decades of labor. These hands have worked this soil since I was a boy, he said. My father's hands look the same, and his father's before him. 3 generations, Mr. President. Same land, same hands. Trump studied them with unexpected interest. Hard work, he acknowledged. Yes, John nodded. But hard work alone isn't enough anymore. Not with the system stacked against us. Trump exhaled slowly. So what do you want from me? Not handouts, John replied immediately. Not speeches. We need real change. Policies that don't just favor corporations but protect the backbone of this country. Trump was quiet for a long moment, a rare occurrence for a man known for filling every silence with words. Ever driven a tractor? John asked with a slight smirk. Trump chuckled. Not lately. John led him to his old John Deere tractor. The green paint faded from years of sun exposure. Hop in. Trump hesitated, then climbed up awkwardly, his expensive suit out of place on the worn leather seat. John handed him the controls. This is what feeds America, Mr. President. Trump gripped the wheel tightly, maneuvering the massive machine forward with unexpected caution. It wasn't easy, and his expression showed it. See, John said, leaning in, this is more than business. It's personal. Trump nodded, a rare look of reflection crossing his face. I get it. Do you? John wasn't convinced. Trump looked out at the endless field stretching to the horizon. Maybe not fully, but I'm starting to. The connection. As they walked back to the farmhouse, John wiped sweat from his brow. We aren't lazy. We aren't asking for favors. But banks treat us like risk while corporations get bailouts. Trump frowned. I believe in free markets. Markets should be fair, not rigged, John countered. If we fail, America's food supply fails. It's that simple. For the first time, Trump looked at the farm, really looked at it. The barn that needed repairs. The fields that represented countless hours of labor. The modest home where generations had been raised. He saw not just numbers and policies, but people struggling to preserve a way of life essential to the nation. And that changed everything. Lisa appeared on the porch. Would you like to stay for dinner, Mr. President? Trump blinked in surprise. Dinner? John chuckled. We're blunt, but we're hospitable. Trump glanced at his watch. His advisors would object. His schedule was tight, but something made him nod. All right. Lisa smiled warmly. Good. You'll see what real farm food tastes like. And hear more of my complaints, John added with a hint of humor. Trump actually laughed. I figured. As they walked inside, John felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this visit would make a difference. He just prayed Trump would remember their conversation long after the presidential convoy disappeared down the dirt road. Little did he know what was coming next. The return. One afternoon a few weeks later, as John was repairing an irrigation pump, the familiar sound of vehicles approaching caught his attention. He looked up to see a black SUV rolling onto his property, followed by another, and another. A Secret Service agent stepped out. Mr. Mitchell, the president wants to see you. John blinked in surprise. Again. Minutes later, Trump himself emerged from one of the vehicles, extending his hand with a confident smile. Told you I wouldn't forget. John shook his head in amazement, grinning despite himself. I'll admit I'm impressed. I don't just talk, John, Trump replied with satisfaction. I deliver. Lisa welcomed them inside, offering coffee and fresh apple pie as if presidential visits were now a normal occurrence at the Mitchell farm. What brings you back, Mr. President? John asked once they were seated. Trump leaned forward, his expression earnest. I want to hear more. The executive order was just the beginning. There's still work to do. John was momentarily speechless. In all his years of watching politicians come and go, he had never seen one return after getting what they wanted, especially not to ask for more input. This wasn't about a photo opportunity or campaign footage. Trump had returned to listen, and that meant everything. The partnership. As the afternoon wore on, Trump walked the field with John, notebook in hand, another unexpected sight. What else do farmers need? He asked directly. John didn't hesitate. Infrastructure. Better roads to get our goods to market. Modern irrigation systems. Access to the kind of equipment that could level the playing field with corporate farms. Low-interest loans that don't strangle us. Trump nodded, making notes. All right, let's make it happen. John squinted at him skeptically. You're serious? Trump smirked. You should know by now, I don't joke about winning. John couldn't help but chuckle. Well, I hope farmers finally start winning too. Trump clapped him on the shoulder. They will. This is just the beginning. For the first time in years, John saw a future where farming wasn't just a constant struggle against impossible odds. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was turning for America's small farmers. And it had all started with a simple invitation that could easily have been ignored. The movement. News outlets descended on the Mitchell farm within hours of the president's second visit. Reporters thrust microphones at John as he tried to go about his daily chores. Why did the president return? One reporter asked. John shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Because he actually cares, I guess. Critics called it a publicity stunt, a calculated move to shore up support in rural America. But John disagreed. He listened when no one else would, he told a skeptical CNN reporter. That matters more than you might think. Trump himself faced the cameras before departing. Farmers are the backbone of America. I won't let them fall, regardless of what the critics say. For once, the constant political divide seemed to fade, if only slightly. Americans across the spectrum, farmers, workers, families struggling to make ends meet, saw something rare, a leader who wasn't just talking but acting. And John Mitchell, once skeptical and bitter, found himself part of something bigger than he had ever imagined. Calls poured in from farmers nationwide, many in tears as they shared their struggles. John, you actually got him to listen, one farmer from Iowa exclaimed. How did you do it? John laughed, still overwhelmed by it all. I just spoke the truth. The advisory board. Trump called again the following week. John, you become the face of this movement whether you wanted to be or not. John shook his head, pacing in his kitchen. I'm just a farmer, Mr. President. And yet here we are, Trump replied. I want you on an advisory board at the Department of Agriculture. We need people who will tell it like it is, not just what we want to hear. John was stunned into silence. Him? In Washington? I'm not a politician, he finally managed. Exactly, Trump said with satisfaction. That's precisely why we need you. John hesitated, looking at Lisa. This wasn't the life they had planned. They were simple people who wanted to work their land and pass it on to their children. But if his voice could help not just his own family, but farmers everywhere. Lisa nodded encouragingly. All right, John agreed, but I won't change who I am. I won't start talking like a politician. I wouldn't want you to, Trump assured him. The transformation. John Mitchell stepped into the White House feeling out of place in his best suit, the one he usually wore only for church on Sundays. His weathered hand seemed wrong against the polished surfaces and historical artifacts. Yet as he sat with policymakers and agricultural experts, something surprising happened. His practical knowledge, his decades of experience, his understanding of the real challenges facing American farmers, these things gave him an authority that no degree or title could confer. John, Trump said during a tense meeting, tell them what farmers really need. John cleared his throat and spoke from the heart, laying out the realities that had been ignored for too long.